Greetings, learners, and welcome to the lesson. The subject is Christian Religious Education. In our today's session, we will proceed with the discussion of the topic Creation and the Fall of Humankind. I will continue with the biblical stories of creation and their meaning. If you can recall, in our last lesson, I stated that there are two creation accounts about the creation of humankind. The first story or account is recorded in Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2 from verse 1 to 4. That's what we covered in our last lesson. The first creation account. The first creation account, we say that the first creation account describes how God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh day. We learned that in the beginning, before the universe was created, the earth was formless, the earth was void, the earth was chaotic. And bringing order into the universe was the starting point of God's creative work. And God is described as a spirit who moved over the waters. That we read in Genesis chapter 1. We also read that God created the heavens and the earth simply by uttering words, "Let there be." He did not need raw materials to create the things that he created. He created the things that we see by way of words. He spoke things into being. That's what we learned in our last lesson, and we described how God worked from day 1 up to the 6th day. We learned on how he rested on the 7th day, and candidates, we learned that on the first day God created light and separated it from darkness, and he named the light day, and darkness he named night. That is on day 1. On the second day, we learned that God created the firmament to separate the waters above from the waters below. And he called the firmament heaven, or what we sometimes refer to as the sky. And the waters, and he also on the same day, the second day, we've seen he created the firmament. That is the second day. On the third day, we learned that God gathered the waters below in one place and separated the water from dry land, which he called the earth, and the gathered waters he called the seas. So on the third day, God created the earth and the seas. He also created all types of vegetation. That is what God created on the third day. The earth, the seas, and all vegetation. We also learned on the fourth day that God decorated the firmament. That is the skies. He decorated the skies by creating lights, all right, which helped to separate day from the night. The greater light he named the sun, which shines during the day, and the lesser lights, that is the moon and the stars, were meant to rule the night. All right? And we saw that the lights were to keep track of time and seasons, days and years. That is what God created on day 4. On the 5th day, we learned that God created the seas and the heavens. He decorated the seas and the heavens. That means he created the birds, all right, the birds and the sea creatures, all right, the creatures. He decorated the sea, the waters. He created all manner of animals that live in the waters. Then he created the birds of the sky. Then in the sixth day, God, we learned, decorated the earth, that is the land, by creating the living creatures, including humankind. We read in the in verse 28 that and God blessed them. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created him, male and female. So on the sixth day, God created man, both male and female. He created them, and God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food, and to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, a sixth day. So that's what God created on the sixth day. He created the living creatures, including humankind, both male and female. Then on the last day, God rested from his work of creation. That's what we learned in our last lesson. In our today's lesson, we're going to outline or study about the meaning of the first account, the meaning of the first creation account. What do we learn from the first creation account? What do we learn? The meaning. The meaning. The meaning. That's what we want to study today. Meaning of the first creation account. Meaning of the first creation account. That is Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2 from verse 1 up to verse 4. What do we learn from that account, from that record of creation of humankind? That is the first biblical story of creation. That's what you want to learn today. So by the end of today's lesson, you'll be able to explain the meaning of the first creation account. So number one, candidates, from this creation account, we learn that everything on earth, everything above the earth, everything below the earth belongs to God. Everything, every what? Everything where? On earth. Everything above the earth. Everything above the earth. And everything below. Okay? Above and below belongs to, and below belongs to God. Think of anything on earth, the land, the trees, the vegetation, the animals, anything that moves on the earth. Every animal belongs to God. Every vegetation belongs to God. Everything above the earth, the sun, the stars, the moon, anything in the heavens belongs to God. Anything below the earth belongs to God. The gold, the silver, the minerals, everything belongs to God. Why? Because we've learned that God singly created the earth. He singly created the heavens and also the seas. There's nowhere where God consulted anyone. Before all of us were created, In fact, all human beings also belongs to God. So there is no human being who helped God in creating these things. Everything belongs to God. It's a very important lesson for human beings, because human beings have a tendency of forgetting that even themselves belong to God. We sometimes behave as if we created ourselves, especially when we get into positions of power, or when we get material wealth, or when we are famous. We tend to forget that we are God's creatures. We are created by God. This is a very important lesson for all human beings. Everything on earth, everything above and below, belongs to God, the Creator. The second lesson we learn from the first creation account is that the universe is expected to be orderly place. The universe is expected to be an orderly place. The universe is expected to be an orderly place since creation. Since creation. Because before creation there was chaos. It was chaotic. It was void. There was no order. But when God came into the scene, he introduced order. So the universe is expected to be orderly. Expected. It may not be orderly, but we shall learn later on why the universe is not as what God intended. We will understand later on why there is no order in the universe, but we need to understand that God expected the universe to be an orderly place since creation. Why? Because God brought about divine order in the universe by carefully and systematically carrying out his plan of creation. And therefore the universe is intended to continue being a place of order. So when there is no order, then we need to understand that is not the intended purpose of God's creation. The third lesson we learn from the first creation account is that all people, both male and female, are equal in the eyes of God. All people. All people, both male and female, are equal before the eyes of God. Both the male and the female are what? Are equal. They were both created in God's image and likeness. That's what we read in Genesis 1. That God created man, both male and female, and he created them in his image and likeness. Image and likeness. Every human being is therefore a special creation of God. Whether the human being is has what sometimes we call disabilities or not. There are people who may not have some limbs, right? There are people who could be lacking certain body organs. There are people who could also be impaired, even mentally. Even those who are mentally impaired, such people are still not, they are not less in terms of the equality. They are not less people. No, they are both, all people, both the male and the female, all people are equal, whether you have disabilities or not, whether you have money or not, whether you are poor, whether you are an African or, doesn't matter the race, the tribe, all people, as long as you are a human being, then you are as good as any other person in the world. There is no superior gender, there is no superior race, there is no superior tribe, okay? All people, male and female, are equal in the eyes of God. They were both created in God's image and likeness. So everyone is special. It's a very important point to note, because at times people may think they are not equally good as others. It doesn't matter the situation in which you are in. It doesn't matter whether you people appreciate you or not. You need to understand that you are equally good. You are as good as any other person. Because all of us were created in the likeness and in the image of God. The fourth lesson we learn from the first creation account is that the male and the female were created for procreation. What does that mean? That means that human beings were created to carry on with God's work of creation. And they are therefore the co-workers with God. Male and female, we read, he created them, and God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. So that means that both the male and the female were created for procreation. He created one man and one female. So these were meant to produce other people. They are meant to give birth. That's what it means, procreation. That was the plan of God. In order to fill the earth, these two, the male and the female, were created to do what? To procreate. The fifth lesson is that God provides for and sustains his creation. This account teaches that God does what? God provides for and sustains his creation. God provides for his creation. God sustains his creation. Why? Because after creating man, God provided him with food. God did what? Provided him with food. We see God commanding man or instructing man that he has dominion over all creatures. We see God, we read that God provided food for the man. He first created the man, then he made sure that man was to be sustained by providing food. In verse 29, and God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit, you shall have them for food. So, candidates, God provides for and sustains his creation. In verse 29, we read that it is him who provides food. God also ensured that all other living creatures had food to eat. Because we read in verse 30 that, and to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. Learners. Verse 29 and verse 30 of Genesis chapter 1 teaches us that God provides food for man as well as the other creatures by making sure that there is enough vegetation. I have given every green plant for food. This body was created to take in certain plants which God has made available on the earth. God does what? God provides for and sustains his creation. That is Genesis chapter 1:29 and 30. Genesis 1:29 and 30. I've read the scripture. Let's move on to point number 6. The sixth lesson or meaning of the first creation account, number 6. God appreciates and delights in the goodness of his creation. God appreciates and delights. He does what? He appreciates and delights in the goodness of his creation. In the goodness God appreciates and delights in the goodness of his creation. Because we read after every creation, because we learned that God created the things in the world or in the universe systematically. He created them systematically. Those things he created on day 1, on day 2, on day 3, day 4, day 5, and day 6. And at the end of every creation, God was pleased with what he had done. And he saw that everything was good. That means that he appreciated what he created, and he also delighted in the goodness of his creation. And towards the end of the creation on the 6th day, we read that God saw what he created to be very good. That's what God described his creation at the end of day 6. That whatever he created, he is described as being very good. He was pleased with what he had done. And learners, you are part of God's creation. When God sees you, it doesn't matter how you look. You may be short, you may be tall, you may be having even, you may be slim, you may have, you may be black, you may have black eyes, you may have, maybe you do not have hair, or you have hair, you may have long hair, you have nails that are long. It doesn't matter how you look. What is important is that in the eyes of God, God is delighted in you. He appreciates you and is delighted in you. When he looks at you, he's delighted. And that is what matters most. Okay? That's number 6. The 7th meaning of the first creation account is in relation to leisure. 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 We learn that leisure is very important. Leisure is important. Leisure is what? Leisure is important and should be taken after work, and should be taken after work. That's what we learn from this account. We see God working from day 1 up to the 6th day. And after his work of creation, we read in the 7th day that God took a rest, and therefore the idea of leisure was instituted by God. He instituted leisure by taking rest after work, and therefore we should also learn from him. We should learn to rest after work. We don't just work throughout. But there is another extreme where there are people who rest before they work. There are people who are just in a state of rest. They have no time for work, and they only rest. And there are those who may concentrate so much on working. So there ought to be some level of balance. We normally say work without play makes Dennis a dull boy. So leisure is important. Later on we shall be learning about leisure in our studies, but it should be noted at this point that leisure is important, that leisure should be taken after work. That is meaning number 7. Moving on to 8, the dignity of human beings should be upheld. The dignity of human beings should be upheld. Why? Because human beings are created in the image and likeness of God, and they are given dominion over all creation. They are done what? They are given dominion over all creation. This is to reinforce the point we gave here. It's related to this point number 3, that all are equal before the eyes of God. But there is this point on human dignity. Human dignity should be upheld. Human dignity should be upheld. Human dignity should be upheld. Why? Because every human being, whether I said is rich or poor, whether is of sound mind or unsound mind, whether is black or white, as long as you are a human being, then you have some level of dignity which should be upheld, because you're not just a human being. You're not just a human being. I'm not just a human being. I'm created in the image and likeness of God. And that we'll be studying in our next session. That is the second creation account. We'll study how God created a human being. There's something special about a human being. All human beings. Something very special. And that special thing we shall learn in our next session when we'll be studying the second creation account. People should be treated with dignity. All people should be handled with dignity. Every human being should be respected. Human dignity should be upheld. God gave human beings dominion over creatures, not dominion over other human beings. So when in a position of authority or leadership, you ought to be very careful when handling or dealing with people. When I say position of leadership, I'm not referring to the politicians only. No, I'm referring to parents who are in a position of leadership over the family. I'm referring to the firstborns. If you are a firstborn, you are in charge of your siblings. If you are a church leader, you have members in your church. If you are in any position, if maybe you are a class representative in a school, you are a head boy, you are a head girl, you need to understand that your role is not to dominate people. No. You should treat people with respect, because dominion, human beings were not to rule, to dominate other people. That was not God's intention. The Bible says, and God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over what? Have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and every living thing that moves upon the earth. So dominion should be over the birds of the air, the fish of the sea. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth, and everything that has breath, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. And God saw that everything that he made was very good. So every human being, we learn from this creation story that the dignity of a human being should be upheld, because human beings are created in the image and likeness of God. Image and likeness of God. And God created them. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. The image and likeness of God. So this is what we learn, candidates, from the first account of creation. The first account of creation. We first learn that everything on earth, above and below, belongs to God. Why? Because it is him who created everything. Number two, we learn from this story that the universe is expected to be an orderly place since creation. It is expected to be orderly. So in event we experience any disorder or chaos, that was not what God intended. God intended the universe to be an orderly place since creation. Number three, we learn from this story that all people, both male and female, are equal before the eyes of God. All people are equal. There is no special gender. There is no tribe that is superior than the other. All people are just equal. As long as you are a human being, you are created in the image of God, we are all equal before eyes of God. Number four, the male and female were created for procreation. Number five, God provides for and sustains his creation. We read in Genesis 1:29 that God provided food for humankind, and in 30 God provides and sustains other creatures. Provides is explained where other creatures should get food, and he provides food for creatures. Then number six, we've learned that God appreciates and delights in the goodness of his creation. He is pleased. God is always pleased with his creation. Then leisure is important and should be taken after work. Leisure is important and should be taken after work. Then number eight, the dignity of human beings should be upheld. That will mark the end of the lesson. In our next session, we will study the second creation account. Then we'll also study the meaning of the second creation account. Remember I said that the second creation account is recorded in Genesis chapter 2 from verse 4 to verse 25, and I want you before the next lesson to read Genesis chapter 2 verse 4 up to verse number 25. That is the record or the account for the second creation story. So here is your today's assignment. Assignment: state 8 lessons learned from the first creation account in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 verse 1 to 4. Ensure the assignment is done before attending our next session. In our next session, we will study the second creation account. Then we also study the meaning of the second creation account, which is recorded in Genesis chapter 2, verse 4 up to verse 25. Thank you. God bless you. Bye-bye.